take a moment and pray with me? Most gracious and loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts on this day be pleasable and accepting in your sight. O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Well, have you ever had someone in your life that knew you so well that they could tell what you were thinking before the words ever came out of your mouth? Anybody? Yeah, this is definitely an interactive sermon. You have to respond. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Adams. Hit the pulpit for me. Or is there someone that's ever told you, the answer you gave wasn't really your real answer? Because you probably feel more like this. Anybody have someone that does that in their life? Yeah. Well, for me, in my life, that person is Shannon Sullivan, who happened to be my roommate from seminary. See, I guess living together for 3 years, you go through a lot together. We went through a lot of late nights of writing papers, proofreading papers, arguing over what we were going to eat for the week, sitting in classes together, driving together to our respective homes. But perhaps the time we had the opportunity to be the closest was when we were both hospital chaplains at Overlook Hospital in Summit, New Jersey. We were a part of a clinical pastoral education group where they would take us in and send us throughout the hospital to serve as chaplains, but then require us to come back and reflect on our work. And one of those requirements is that you write verbatims about patients that you spend time with. And it's private. You don't share information so much, just more or less what you shared as a chaplain. And it's a time where all the other chaplains get to sit in the room and they pick you apart. They say, you did well here, but you really could have done better here. And to be honest, it's not the most pleasant experience in your life. So most of the time it was a dreaded day when it was your turn to present the verbatim. And on this particular day, it was my turn. And I thought I picked one of those easy cases where not a lot could be said, except I forgot that my roommate would be present. And she would know that I had picked an easy case, and she would know that that was the patient that I'd come home in tears over because of the wonderful conversation we had and how she changed my life. Things that I purposely left out of the verbatim because I didn't want everyone in the group to know. And honestly, I got nailed that day by my roommate. She said, "Lauren, be honest with yourself. You've left some things out, and it's not because it's painful for you, but it's because you don't trust us." There I was, exposed in the crowd. And what should have been a short 30-minute verbatim should have been no problem, turned to be one of the most painful hour and a halves of my life. But if she had let me go, I would have never dealt with my trust issues with some of the members of the group. And being able to say to them, I need to work on my relationship with you. She helped me find a stumbling block in my own life. Something that I'm glad she did, because by the end of the program, I was grateful that I could trust my fellow chaplains and colleagues, and even learn to call on them when perhaps they had skills to offer that one of my patients needed. See, and I think the gospel story today is a reminder of how Jesus is that person that knows everything about us, who calls us out sometimes. It's more than just money, which is what we often think of when we first read this passage. See, we have a rich young man who in this story is trying to impress Jesus. He thought he'd followed the law literally. He was a man of notoriety because of his wealth and ability to follow the law to the T. Most likely popular. People would do whatever he wanted because of his wealth and his status. I think that was in that mindset that day. He approached Jesus, another notorious figure. He approached Jesus with an attitude of, I'm going to get what I want. However, the young man strikes out with his first comment. He calls Jesus the good teacher. And Jesus reminds him that only God can be called good. It's in that moment that Jesus lets the young man know that he knows everything about him. He can see his potential. And he can see that he's followed the law. He can see that he's someone that would be a good disciple, and calls him right there and says, "Come and follow me." But despite his potential and his ability to follow the law, the man still had a stumbling block in his life. His wealth had caused him to focus on the things of this world instead of bringing the kingdom of God here on earth. His wealth had created an attitude of entitlement. So Jesus called him out on it and said, "You must change your ways. You must change your attitude in order to have eternal life." And it caught the man off guard. Perhaps sometimes how we're caught off guard when our friends or family members pose those difficult questions in our lives. Here was a man that was so in love with money that he could not bear this big news, could not bear this opportunity to be a disciple. So we know he turns to leave in grief. I'm sure struggling between something that he loved so much and something that he wanted so badly. Just like this young man in the gospel story, we all have our own stumbling blocks that Jesus can see. Jesus knows everything about us, our potential, our struggles, our true motives. Jesus knows what keeps us from fully committing to the way of discipleship. Jesus knows the things that separates us from God. And Jesus, my friends, is the one who's going to ask us the tough questions. Like, are you ready to change that attitude? Are you ready to be committed to the way of discipleship? Are you willing to restore yourself to God? Jesus will lead us to that moment where we have a decision to make. We have two choices. We can repent, turn and follow him, or we can be like the young rich man in our story and walk away in grief, maintaining our focus on the things of this world. And another important thing I think we need to remember about our gospel story this morning that we find in Mark is the understanding of what wealth meant during this time period. If you were wealthy, then you obviously had God's blessing and providence upon your life. So here we are with a rich man in this story who should have already had God's blessing and God's favor. But Jesus turns that notion on its head. Seeing the young man walk away, the disciples thought, "Hey, I got the answer right. We've given up our material wealth, the things that we own, to follow Jesus." They walked away from it all, and surely they had to have the favor of the Lord. And Jesus would surely turn to them and say, "Yes, you are indeed right. You finally got the answer, friends. You will have eternal life." However, just like all the other accounts we've been reading in Mark, we know that the disciples missed the mark yet again. They too have stumbling blocks. Perhaps for some of them it wasn't money, but they did have things that they needed to deal with. Just like attitudes about who was going to be first, perhaps some issues around jealousy, those who struggled with keeping silent, those who were striving for political power and position within the kingdom. How about those that were able to forgive? And let's not forget that they had been quick to condemn others on their journey. There are multiple experiences, my friends, that can separate us from God if we allow them to become stumbling blocks in our relationship with God. That is what Jesus was trying to say to the young man. That's what Jesus was saying to the disciples. And that's what Jesus says to us today. Jesus, in my opinion, truly highlighted one of the struggles that every generation faces. Our temptation to build a reward in heaven, looking to a place far off. And we miss the opportunity by doing that. We miss the opportunity to live in the here and the now. We miss the opportunity to be a part of the unfolding of the kingdom of God here on earth. We're willing to work on the stumbling blocks in our own lives, and we'll experience a piece of heaven here on earth, in the here and the now. Jesus knew that for mortals this would be an impossible